Imagine climbing down a wooden ladder into 10 meters of tidal water inside a wartime British harbor. You are wearing a heavy rubber suit, lead-weighted shoes, and a breathing apparatus strapped to your chest. Within 3 feet of the surface, the light vanishes completely. You are not swimming. You are crawling on your hands and knees through cold, thick silt that smells like diesel and rotting seaweed. You cannot see your own fingers. You cannot use a flashlight because suspended mud renders light completely useless, like turning on high beams in a blinding fog. Your entire world is shrunk to what you can feel through thick rubber gloves, or better yet, with bare, numb fingers. And somewhere in that black mud, inches from your knees, sits a cylindrical metal casing containing 500 kilograms of high explosive. Your job is not to blow it up from a safe distance. Your job is to reach inside its mechanical housing, find a specific brass retaining ring, insert a wooden or brass gag, and disable a triggering mechanism that might react to the metal in your watch, the sound of your tool scraping a bolt, or the slight shift in water pressure as you move. To understand how human beings ended up doing this work, you have to go back to late 1939. Shortly after the Second World War began, British merchant ships started exploding in estuaries and harbor entrances around the United Kingdom. They were not hitting conventional moored naval mines, which floated on steel cables near the surface. These ships were blowing up in open channels that had already been swept. The culprit was the German Luftmine, specifically types like the LMB. These were massive parachute-dropped ground mines. They did not float. They sank straight to the seabed and waited in the mud. Inside was a needle-sensitive magnetic sensor designed to detect the massive iron hull of a cargo ship passing overhead. When one of these mines landed in deep ocean water, minesweepers could try to explode it with magnetic sweep cables. But when German bombers started dropping them into shallow rivers, port entrances, and tidal mudflats, sweeping did not always work. If a mine rested near a pier or an anchorage, detonating it in place would destroy the very harbor the Navy was trying to protect. Someone had to go down into the mud and disarm it by hand. At first, the Royal Navy tried using standard deep-sea divers. The classic image of a diver in a heavy canvas suit with a copper helmet, iron boots, and air hoses trailing up to a pump on a surface vessel. But those suits had a fatal flaw. The standard equipment was loaded with iron and steel. The heavy lead shoes were studded with iron nails. The diving knife was steel. The spanners and pliers in the tool bag were forged steel. The moment a traditional diver in a standard helmet walked past a German magnetic mine, the iron in his gear altered the local magnetic field. The mine would read his presence as a 5,000-ton freighter and detonate instantly. On top of that, standard surface-supplied diving gear produced huge streams of noisy air bubbles. As German weapon designers realized British bomb disposal officers were recovering intact mines, they began adding acoustic sensors to the fuses. The sound of air bubbles popping, or the metallic click of a steel wrench against a casing, was enough to trigger a detonation. In April 1941 at Falmouth, an officer and 5 men were killed in an instant when an acoustic unit on a seabed mine was triggered by the faint mechanical sound of a tool gagging the fuse mechanism. The Admiralty realized that if they wanted to clear underwater explosives, they needed an entirely new kind of human operator. The effort coalesced at HMS Vernon, the Royal Navy's torpedo and mining establishment in Portsmouth. 2 Australian volunteer reserve officers, John Stuart Mould and Leon Goldsworthy, began working on a radical idea. They needed to eliminate every piece of magnetic material from the diver's body. The steel cylinders used in breathing gear were swapped out for non-magnetic alloys. Helmets were done away with entirely. Instead, divers wore closed-circuit rebreathers based on modified submarine escape sets. Because a rebreather recycles oxygen internally through a chemical canister that absorbs carbon dioxide, it produces 0 bubbles. No bubbles meant no noise. The divers wore rubber suits with brass fittings, lead weights cast without iron impurities, and canvas plimsolls weighted with lead. Their tools were manufactured entirely out of non-magnetic brass, bronze, or wood. When a diver was dressed in this gear, he was magnetically invisible. These units became known as port clearance parties, or simply P parties. Their mission was not combat frogman operations or underwater sabotage. Their sole purpose was underwater bomb and mine disposal under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The operational reality of a P-party diver was methodical to the point of monotony, right up until it became terrifying. When a harbor or shipping channel was suspected of containing unexploded mines, the team did not just jump into the water and swim around hoping to stumble onto something. They used a system called a jackstay search. Naval crews on the surface would drop heavy sinker weights to the seabed, connecting them with long brass wire lines stretched tightly across the harbor floor. This created a precise underwater grid. The diver would descend down the guide rope to the seabed, find the jackstay wire, and begin crawling along it on his knees. He would sweep his arms back and forth across the mud on one side of the wire for a set distance, then turn around and sweep the other side on the way back. Once a section was cleared, the surface crew would shift the wire line over by a few feet, and the diver would start again. Remember, this was done in total darkness. The diver could not check his watch, could not look at a compass, and could not see a mine until his bare hand physically bumped against cold metal in the mud. He had to identify what kind of weapon he was touching purely by shape. Was it a smooth steel cylinder? Was it an aluminum casing? Was there a parachute housing attached to the tail? Once the diver identified the mine, the real tension began. German engineers knew their weapons were being disarmed, so they turned mine fuses into an ongoing chess match against bomb disposal personnel. A typical German ground mine like the LMB had a main fuse pocket located on its side. To make the mine safe, the diver had to insert a specialized locking pin, or gag, into the fuse mechanism to prevent the firing pin from striking the primer. Sounds straightforward on paper. But German designers added secondary anti-handling devices. Some mines contained anti-disturbance fuses featuring tiny internal pendulums or mercury switches. If the mine was tilted by more than a few degrees, or if a diver tried to roll it over in the mud to reach the fuse pocket, the circuit closed and the main charge detonated. Other mines contained hydrostatic clockwork fuses designed to detonate if the water pressure around the mine changed, such as during a falling tide. Still others were fitted with anti-withdrawal traps. If a diver successfully unscrewed the outer locking ring of a fuse, a spring-loaded plunger behind it would snap forward as the ring came off, detonating the weapon anyway. The diver had to feel every screw thread with his fingertips. He had to know by memory alone exactly how many turns of a brass tool were required before a fuse pocket became dangerous. If he encountered resistance, he had to judge whether it was corrosion or a spring-loaded booby trap waiting to trip. The ultimate test of the Peace Parties came in June 1944. Following the Normandy landings, the Allied armies urgently needed a deep water port to land heavy vehicles, fuel, and ammunition. The German garrison at Cherbourg held out for weeks, and before surrendering, they systematically destroyed the port facilities. They scuttled concrete-filled ships across harbor basins, collapsed cranes into the water, and seeded the muddy basins with hundreds of sea mines, booby-trapped demolition charges, and sunken aircraft bombs. General Eisenhower noted that the liberation of France would stall entirely if Cherbourg could not be opened to shipping. Peace Parties 1501 and 1502 were rushed across the English Channel. Working in the foul, oil-slicked waters of the Cherbourg docks, small teams of divers spent weeks crawling through the debris-littered mud. They worked up to 6 hours a day in zero visibility, clearing scuttled wrecks and disarming booby traps buried under yards of toxic silt. In one instance, divers found German charges wired directly into the structural piling of the docks, rigged with multiple secondary fuses designed to detonate if anyone cut the main firing wire. Working entirely by touch, they traced every wire back to its detonator and neutralized the charges one by one. By mid-August 1944, the Peace Parties declared the basins clear, allowing Allied supply ships to dock and unload the fuel that powered the breakout across France. When World War II ended, the Peace Parties were disbanded, but their work laid the foundation for modern naval clearance diving units around the world. The techniques they pioneered, non-magnetic rebreathers, systematic jackstay grid searches, and non-ferrous tools, remain fundamental to underwater bomb disposal to this day. Thousands of unexploded wartime sea mines, aviation bombs, and sunken munitions still rest in the shallow waters of the North Sea, the English Channel, and the coastal waterways of Europe. Decades of immersion in salt water have rusted their outer casings, making their remaining fuses more unstable, not less. When modern naval divers are called out to deal with a discovered wartime mine off the coast of England or France, they carry digital sonar, remote-operated vehicles, and high-tech communications. But when the conditions force a human diver to go down into the black mud, the fundamental reality has not changed. It is still one human being, alone in the quiet dark, relying entirely on their hands to solve a dangerous puzzle left behind by history.